Welcome to Okinawa, a jewel of Japan. Known for its stunning beaches and rich culture, it also holds a darker secret. This is the story of Rina Shimabukuro, a 32-year-old woman whose disappearance shocked the island. She was a vibrant soul, a determined professional. Friends described her as independent and ambitious, someone who had built a fulfilling life. She had recently started a relationship with a local man, a relationship that seemed to promise a future filled with family. But on a warm evening in 2015, Rina's life took a tragic turn. She left her apartment around 8 p.m., a simple walk to clear her head. She wore a black parka and raspberry-colored sneakers. Little did she know, this would be her last seen. Rina's boyfriend reported her missing the next morning. The police launched an immediate investigation. Initial searches yielded no clues. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to dwindle. Then, a crucial piece of evidence emerged: GPS data from Rina's phone. It indicated her last known location was near an industrial area along a canal, a route she frequented. Investigators reviewed hundreds of surveillance videos from the area that night. One vehicle stood out, a red SUV. The owner of the vehicle was identified as Kenneth Franklin Gatson, an African-American former U.S. Marine who had served in Okinawa. He had returned to the island as a civilian after his honorable discharge. Kenneth's presence near Rina's last known location raised immediate suspicion. He had rented an apartment in Okinawa and lived with Rina for several months. Neighbors described them as an ordinary family, though some noted Kenneth's unsettling past. Before coming to Okinawa, Kenneth had a history of disturbing thoughts, fantasies involving abduction and violence, dating back to childhood. Despite mental health concerns, he had maintained a seemingly normal facade. The investigation intensified. Police found inconsistencies in Kenneth's statements and discovered he had been driving erratically around the time of Rina's disappearance. The evidence against Kenneth mounted. Digital forensics revealed further details, placing his red SUV in the vicinity of the canal at the time Rina vanished. Investigators also found traces of Rina's belongings in his vehicle. The Okinawan community was reeling from the news. Rina's disappearance had been a shock, and the revelation of the circumstances surrounding it ignited outrage. Her parents demanded justice, pushing for the death penalty, a punishment still in use in Japan for particularly heinous crimes. The trial was highly publicized, drawing national attention and sparking debates about the justice system and mental health in Japan. In 2018, Kenneth Franklin Gatson was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. The case of Rina Shimabukuro became a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a seemingly peaceful surface. While the legal proceedings concluded, questions remain. How did Rina, a woman who dreamed of a large family, end up in such a tragic situation? What were the full extent of Kenneth's disturbing thoughts? The case also brought renewed attention to the presence of U.S. military bases in Okinawa and the ongoing local protests demanding fewer bases and stricter oversight. The slow pace of progress on these political issues often overshadowed individual tragedies. But Rina's story serves as a stark reminder that even in paradise, shadows can exist. Detective Miller leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Gatson, we've established your presence in Okinawa, your relationship with Rina. We've also found items of hers in your vehicle. Items you didn't disclose." Kenneth's Adam's apple bobbed. He avoided her eyes, focusing on a stain on the table. I already told you everything. We were happy. It was a normal life." Miller sighed, a sound heavy with weariness. "Normal doesn't usually involve disappearing acts, Mr. Gatson. Normal doesn't usually involve traces of a missing person's belongings being found in your car. We have witnesses who place your SUV near the canal on the night Rina vanished. Can you explain that?" Kenneth stammered, I sometimes drove around. I liked the scenery." His voice lacked conviction. Miller's expression remained impassive. "The scenery at 3 a.m., Mr. Gatson? Near a known dumping site? We're not asking questions anymore. We're looking for answers. And right now, your story isn't adding up." A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent light. Kenneth's knuckles were white. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, defeated. The weight of the past, the unresolved mystery of Rena's disappearance, pressed down on him. Back in the present, Detective Ramirez stared at the wooden bird. It had been found tucked away in a box of Kenneth's belongings, a seemingly insignificant object. But something about it felt significant. It was clearly handmade, the wood smooth from years of handling. Ramirez had consulted with an art historian specializing in Okinawan crafts. The bird was a traditional symbol of freedom and hope, often given as a gift to someone embarking on a new journey. The historian noted the unique carving style, identifying it as the work of a reclusive artisan living in a remote village on the island. Further investigation revealed the artisan's name, Hanasato. Ramirez felt a flicker of hope. Hanasato was known for her detailed records, documenting every piece she created and the individual she gifted them to. Perhaps, just perhaps, Hanasato held a clue to Rena's fate. Ramirez requested an interview with Ms. Sato, hoping the small wooden bird would unlock a hidden piece of the puzzle. The bird felt like a whisper from the past, a fragile link to the missing girl. The village of Naha was a world away from the sterile interrogation room. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and sea salt. Ramirez found Hanasato's workshop tucked away on a quiet side street. It was a small, unassuming building, filled with the scent of wood shavings and varnish. Hanasato, an elderly woman with kind eyes and nimble hands, greeted Ramirez with a gentle smile. She examined the wooden bird with a practiced eye. "Ah, yes," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "I remember carving this for a young woman. She was so full of dreams." Hanasato explained that the woman had been a frequent visitor to her village, drawn to the tranquility and the traditional crafts. She remembered the woman's name, Rena. Rena had been researching local folklore, particularly legends about the island's hidden caves and ancient shrines. Hanasato recalled Rena mentioning a specific cave, one said to be a place of great spiritual significance. Guided by Hanasato's description, Ramirez and a search team ventured into the island's interior. The cave was a labyrinth of twisting tunnels and hidden chambers. The air was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the dripping water. After hours of searching, they discovered a small, hidden alcove concealed behind a curtain of moss. Inside, they found a collection of Rena's belongings, her journal, her camera, and a small, intricately carved stone pendant. The journal entries detailed Rena's growing fascination with the local legends and her belief that the hidden cave held a secret. The final entry was cryptic, mentioning a place of reflection and its truth buried in the stone. Ramirez felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a disappearance anymore, it was something more complex, something tied to the island's history and its hidden past. The stone pendant felt cool to the touch, a tangible link to Rena's final moments. Back in the city, Detective Miller held the stone pendant in her hand, the setting sun reflecting off its surface. The evidence was still circumstantial, but the discovery of Rena's belongings in the cave had shifted the focus. Kenneth Gatson's story was unraveling. The normal life he had portrayed was a carefully constructed facade. The island's legends, Rena's research, Hanasato's memory, they all pointed to a deeper truth. Kenneth hadn't just been living a lie, he had been manipulating Rena, guiding her towards a place he knew. The place of reflection wasn't just a cave, it was a place where he had intended to control her narrative. Miller knew the final piece of the puzzle was within reach. The truth about Rena Shimabukuro, buried in the stone and the shadows of Okinawa, was finally starting to surface. Hana traced the carving with a gloved finger. It wasn't just artistry, it was a map, she realized. A map of the cave system, far more detailed than any natural formation would suggest. The symbols were unlike anything she'd ever encountered, a blend of ancient island dialects and something older. A shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a sanctuary, deliberately constructed and concealed. She noted a recurring symbol, a stylized wave crashing against a jagged rock. It appeared to mark a hidden passage, one not on Miller's team's maps. The air grew colder, a subtle change that prickled her skin. She felt watched. This place held secrets, powerful and potentially dangerous. She needed to understand them, but a growing unease told her she wasn't the only one seeking them out. The carvings seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. Hannah's heart pounded. This discovery complicated everything. Rena wasn't just hiding, she was part of something bigger, something ancient. Davies, run a background check on any known legends or myths associated with this island, particularly those involving hidden passages or ancient rituals. I want everything. And check local historical records for any mention of unusual stone formations or structures. Hannah Sato's map suggests this cave isn't natural. Miller pulled her collar up against the drizzle. The island felt different. A sense of ancient power lingered in the humid air, a weight on her shoulders. She trusted Hannah's instincts implicitly. The pendant, the cave, Rena's belongings, it all pointed to something far beyond a simple disappearance. This isn't a straightforward case, Davies. I have a feeling we're dealing with something older than we anticipated. She glanced back at the dark maw of the cave, a sense of foreboding settling in her stomach. The rain intensified slightly, washing over the jungle foliage. Miller adjusted her grip on her service weapon. She was prepared for anything, but she wasn't sure anything could truly prepare her for what they might find inside. The tunnel narrowed, forcing Ramirez to duck. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else, metallic. "Sergeant, I'm getting some unusual readings on my scanner," Ramirez reported, his voice hushed. "Low-frequency energy signature. It's faint, but definitely present." Lee frowned. "What kind of energy?" "I'm not sure. It's unlike anything I've encountered. Almost organic." The tunnel twisted sharply, leading them deeper into the earth. Water trickled down the walls, creating a constant, unsettling rhythm. Ramirez felt a growing sense of claustrophobia. The darkness seemed to press in on him, amplifying every sound. He glanced back, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. The metallic scent grew stronger. "Be ready," Ramirez murmured. "I have a bad feeling about this." The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, revealing a strange, glowing moss covering the walls. Hannah's device beeped insistently. "There's a cavity behind this section of the wall," she announced, her voice tight with excitement. The scan showed a hollow space, cleverly concealed within the rock. She carefully pressed against the carved wave, and with a low rumble, a section of the wall slid inward, revealing a narrow passage. Dust motes danced in the beam of her headlamp as she peered into the darkness. A musty odor wafted out, carrying with it the faint scent of incense. This wasn't natural, she breathed. The passage descended steeply, disappearing into an inky blackness. A sense of anticipation mixed with apprehension filled her. This was it, the hidden passage. But what lay beyond? She hesitated for only a moment, then adjusted her headlamp and stepped into the unknown. The air inside the passage was noticeably warmer, almost stifling. The passage opened into a vast chamber, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. Strange symbols, unlike any known language, covered the walls, glowing faintly in the darkness. In the center of the chamber stood an altar made of polished obsidian, its surface reflecting the light of their flashlights like a dark mirror. On the altar lay a single object, an intricately carved wooden box. "What is that?" Lee whispered, his hand instinctively moving towards his weapon. Ramirez approached cautiously. "I don't know, but it feels important." He reached out to touch the box, but a voice echoed through the chamber. "Do not touch it." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, sending a chill down their spines. They spun around, but the chamber was empty. The only sound was the dripping of water and the faint hum emanating from the obsidian altar. Ramirez adjusted his helmet lamp, the beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. "Those symbols, they're almost hypnotic," Hannah murmured, her eyes tracing the intricate patterns etched into the obsidian. The air hummed with a barely perceptible vibration, a low thrumming that resonated deep within their chests. "The energy signature is strongest near the altar," Ramirez stated, his hand tightening on his pulse rifle. He scanned the chamber, his gaze sweeping across the walls, searching for any sign of movement, any indication of what this place truly was. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the hiss of their respirators and the occasional drip of water echoing from the unseen depths of the cavern. He noticed a faint shimmer above the altar, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day. "Hannah, be ready for anything. This doesn't feel right." The metallic scent intensified, now laced with something else, something vaguely organic and unsettling. A sense of foreboding settled over them, heavy and suffocating. The symbols seemed to pulse with a light of their own, drawing their attention, beckoning them closer to the unknown. They had stumbled upon something ancient, something powerful, and something undeniably dangerous. Hannah hesitated, her fingers hovering just above the glowing symbol. The symbol pulsed warmer now, radiating a gentle heat that she could feel even through her glove. "I don't like this," she whispered, pulling her hand back slightly. "It feels alive." Ramirez approached, his face etched with concern. "Don't touch it, Hannah. We don't know what it is." But Hannah was already lost in the intricate design, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. She had dedicated her life to deciphering lost languages and forgotten histories. This wasn't just a language, it was a key, a map to something unimaginable. She felt an irresistible pull, a compulsion to understand the meaning behind these symbols. I think it's a resonance pattern," she explained, her voice barely audible. "A frequency, a harmonic. It's almost like a song." She took a tentative step forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing symbol. "I need to analyze it. To understand its purpose." Ramirez knew arguing was futile. Hannah was a brilliant scientist, driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. And sometimes, that thirst could lead her into dangerous territory. "Hannah, this isn't a lab. This is a tomb, or something worse," Ramirez said, his voice firm but laced with concern. He knew pushing her too hard would be counterproductive, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The low hum intensified, and the shimmering above the altar grew stronger, coalescing into a swirling vortex of energy. The symbols on the walls pulsed faster, their light becoming almost blinding. He noticed a subtle change in Hannah's demeanor. Her eyes were unfocused, her breathing shallow. She seemed to be connected to the symbols, as if they were flowing through her. "Hannah! Are you all right?" he shouted, reaching out to steady her. She didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the altar, her lips moving silently as if chanting. The air crackled with energy, and the metallic scent became overpowering, inducing a slight nausea. He gripped his weapon tighter, ready to intervene, but he hesitated, unsure of what to do. He felt a growing sense of urgency, a feeling that time was running out. Within the vortex above the altar, shadows began to coalesce. At first, they were just indistinct shapes, swirling and shifting within the energy field. But as the vortex intensified, the shadows began to take form. They were vaguely humanoid, but distorted and grotesque, with elongated limbs and empty, black eyes. Whispers echoed from within the vortex, unintelligible yet deeply unsettling. The humming escalated to a deafening roar, shaking the very foundations of the chamber. Ramirez shielded his eyes, struggling to maintain his balance. Hannah remained transfixed, her body trembling slightly. She seemed to be communicating with the entities within the vortex, as if she were a conduit. What are those things?" she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Ramirez didn't answer. He didn't dare. He knew, with chilling certainty, that they had awakened something ancient and malevolent. The shadowy figures began to descend from the vortex, their forms solidifying into tangible entities. They reached out with long, skeletal fingers, their touch promising oblivion. The shadowy figures solidified, their forms now fully realized. They were creatures of darkness and despair, their presence radiating an aura of cold, ancient malice. They moved with unnatural grace, gliding towards Ramirez and Hannah with predatory intent. The obsidian altar pulsed with an unholy light, amplifying the energy of the vortex. Hannah finally broke free from her trance, her eyes wide with horror. "We have to stop it," she screamed, scrambling backwards. Ramirez raised his weapon, firing a volley of rounds at the approaching figures. The bullets seemed to pass right through them, having no effect. "They're not physical," he yelled, desperately trying to find a way to combat these ethereal beings. The figures advanced relentlessly, their silent approach more terrifying than any roar. The chamber was filled with the stench of ozone and decay. The fate of Ramirez and Hannah, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. The symbols on the walls flared, bathing the chamber in an eerie, pulsating light. Ramirez drew his weapon, the metallic clang echoing unnervingly in the oppressive silence. "Stay close," he murmured, his eyes darting between the encroaching figures. Hannah nodded, her hand instinctively reaching for the amulet hidden beneath her cloak. The air grew colder, heavy with a sense of dread. The shadowy creatures didn't speak, but their silent approach was far more terrifying. They exuded an ancient power, a hunger that seemed to pierce through Hannah's defenses. She felt a tremor of fear, a primal instinct screaming at her to flee, but she knew they couldn't. This was the culmination of everything: the search, the risks, the sacrifices. She focused on the amulet, trying to channel its energy, a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. Ramirez met the lead shadow's gaze, his jaw tight. He was a seasoned warrior, but even he felt a prickle of unease. These weren't mere monsters, they were something far older, something steeped in forgotten lore. The vortex above pulsed, casting eerie shadows that danced on the tomb walls, twisting familiar shapes into grotesque parodies. The amulet pulsed warmly against Hannah's skin, a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. A golden light, thin at first, began to push back against the shadows that clawed at her mind. The energy felt foreign, yet strangely familiar, resonating with something deep within her. She concentrated, drawing on every ounce of willpower to amplify the amulet's power. The shadows hissed, recoiling slightly from the golden light. But they were relentless, their forms shifting and reforming, adapting to her efforts. Ramirez moved forward, firing shots at the shadowy figures, but the projectiles seemed to pass harmlessly through them, dissipating into nothingness before reaching their targets. He cursed under his breath. This was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The shadow seemed to absorb the energy of his weapon, growing stronger with each attempt. Hannah felt her strength waning, the amulet's light flickering. She needed to find a way to disrupt the vortex, to sever the creature's connection to whatever realm they came from. Ramirez's shots were futile, the shadowy figures seemed impervious to physical attacks. He realized they were not bound by the laws of this world. The vortex above intensified, the humming growing into a deafening drone. The shadows within pulsed with a malevolent energy, feeding off the fear and desperation of those present. Hannah struggled to maintain the amulet's protective field. The golden light flickered violently, threatened by the overwhelming darkness. She felt a searing pain in her temples, a sense of her mind being invaded. Images flashed before her eyes, ancient rituals, forgotten gods, and a cataclysmic event that had plunged the world into darkness. She gasped, momentarily losing her focus. Ramirez saw her falter and rushed to her side, shielding her from the encroaching shadows. "Hannah, focus," he yelled, his voice strained. "We need to break the connection." Ramirez's intervention bought Hannah a precious moment. He stood as a bulwark, deflecting the shadowy tendrils that reached for her. But he couldn't hold them back for long. The creatures pressed their attack, their forms solidifying into grotesque parodies of human figures. Their eyes glowed with a cold, malevolent light. Hannah, regaining her composure, realized the amulet wasn't just a shield, it was a key. A key to severing the connection. She focused all her remaining energy, channeling the amulet's power into a single, concentrated beam of light. It wasn't a weapon, but a disruptor. She aimed it at the heart of the vortex, a desperate gamble. The air crackled with energy. The beam of golden light struck the vortex with a blinding flash. The swirling shadows convulsed, the humming intensifying into a piercing shriek. The vortex flickered, destabilizing, its energy dissipating rapidly. The shadowy figures recoiled, their forms dissolving into wisps of darkness. They shrieked in frustration, their ancient malice now tinged with panic. Ramirez watched in stunned silence as the creatures began to fade. The oppressive atmosphere in the tomb began to lift, the cold receding. The golden light from the amulet dimmed, but a sense of relief washed over Hannah. The immediate threat was gone, but she knew this was only a temporary victory. The connection wasn't severed completely, just disrupted. The shadows lingered, a silent promise of a future encounter. The golden energy cascaded outwards, a wave of pure force washing over the encroaching shadows. They shrieked, not with a sound, but a feeling of agonizing disruption. The vortex, once a raging storm of darkness, buckled and groaned, its swirling depths revealing glimpses of empty space. Ramirez grunted, the strain of holding back the remaining tendrils evident in his clenched jaw. He felt the unnatural cold of the shadows attempting to seep through his defenses, a chilling contrast to the warmth radiating from Hannah. The air crackled with residual energy, the scent of ozone sharp in their nostrils. The shadowy figures, though weakened, weren't defeated. They clung to the edges of the dissipating vortex, their forms flickering like dying embers. Hannah staggered back, her hand trembling, the golden light fading from her fingertips. Exhaustion clouded her eyes, but a spark of determination still burned within. "It's not over," she gasped, her voice hoarse. Ramirez nodded grimly, adjusting his grip on his weapon. The battle had shifted, but the war was far from won. The weakened vortex pulsed erratically, a volatile threat. The receding shadows retreated, not fleeing in terror, but withdrawing strategically. They melted back into the surrounding darkness, reforming at the periphery of the battlefield. But the reprieve was short-lived. A new vortex began to coalesce a few feet away, smaller than the first, yet radiating a similar malevolent energy. This one pulsed with a deeper, more insidious darkness, a subtle difference that sent a shiver down Ramirez's spine. "Another one," he muttered, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Hannah scanned the surroundings, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They're adapting," she observed, her voice tight with concern. "They're learning from our attack." The smaller vortex spiraled faster, its darkness intensifying. Tendrils of shadow snaked out, probing the air, searching for a weakness. The creatures that emerged from it were smaller, more agile, but no less deadly. They moved with a speed that defied comprehension, darting around Ramirez and Hannah, testing their defenses. This wasn't a simple battle of brute force, it was a test of endurance, of adaptability. Hannah closed her eyes, drawing on the remaining reserves of her energy. The golden light flickered within her, a fragile flame against the encroaching darkness. She focused her mind, visualizing the vortex, the energy flow, the points of vulnerability. This time, she needed more than just raw power, she needed precision, control. Ramirez remained vigilant, his eyes darting across the shadows, anticipating any attack. He knew that Hannah was pushing herself to the limit, and he felt a surge of protectiveness towards her. He was her shield, her anchor in this chaotic reality. "Be careful," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Hannah opened her eyes, a steely glint in their depths. "I will," she replied, her voice firm. She extended her hand again, the golden light intensifying, but this time, it was shaped, focused, directed. A concentrated beam of golden light erupted from Hannah's hand, a laser-like projection aimed directly at the nascent vortex. The smaller shadowy figures scattered, attempting to evade the searing energy, but their movements were clumsy, their reflexes slow. The beam struck the vortex with pinpoint accuracy, disrupting its formation, causing it to shudder violently. The smaller shadows shrieked in frustration, their forms flickering erratically. Ramirez stood ready, his weapon raised, intercepting any tendrils that managed to break through Hannah's defense. He moved with fluid grace, a whirlwind of motion, deflecting the shadows with precise strikes. The air crackled with energy, the scent of ozone intensifying. The battle was a dance of light and shadow, a contest of wills. Hannah's focus wavered slightly as she maintained the beam, her energy draining rapidly. Ramirez noticed her strain and adjusted his position, providing additional support, a silent promise of protection. With a final, agonizing groan, the smaller vortex imploded, collapsing in on itself with a violent surge of dark energy. A wave of shadow washed outwards, momentarily pushing back the surrounding darkness. The smaller shadowy figures dissipated completely, their forms dissolving into nothingness. Hannah collapsed to her knees, her energy completely spent. The golden light faded from her, leaving her pale and weak. Ramirez rushed to her side, supporting her weight. "Hannah," he exclaimed, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" She leaned against him, breathing heavily. I'm okay, she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. It's over, for now. The remaining shadows retreated further, sensing the shift in power. The air slowly cleared, the oppressive darkness receding slightly. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The victory over the smaller vortex had been Pyrrhic. Hannah stumbled, catching herself against a cold, damp wall. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her breath came in ragged gasps. The larger vortex, however, remained, a gaping maw of shadow, steadily growing in size. It pulsed with a malevolent energy that seemed to drain the very life from the cavern. She could feel its tendrils reaching out, probing for weakness, for an opening. This was far more powerful than she had anticipated. The symbols on the walls seemed to writhe, their faint pulses intensifying as if feeding the encroaching darkness. A chilling whisper echoed through the cavern, a voice not of this world, promising oblivion. She had to find a way to disrupt the core, to sever the connection before it consumed everything. Her energy reserves were dwindling, and time was running out. Doubt, a cold serpent, began to coil in her mind. Could she truly win this fight? The sheer scale of the darkness was overwhelming. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing strength from the memory of those she was fighting to protect. This wasn't just about her, it was about the future. Desperation fueled Hannah's next move. She remembered an ancient text, a forgotten ritual involving resonance and focused energy. The crystalline shard, a relic of a bygone era, was key. It resonated with the very energies that powered the vortex, potentially acting as a conduit for a counterattack. Reaching out, she carefully pried the shard loose, ignoring the sharp pain as it scraped against her skin. As her fingers closed around it, a surge of raw power flowed into her, invigorating her weakened form. The shard pulsed with a brilliant light, amplifying the golden energy within her. The whispers intensified, laced with fury, as the vortex seemed to sense her defiance. The cavern walls trembled, and the shadows writhed with renewed intensity. This was a gamble, a desperate attempt to turn the tide. If she failed, the darkness would consume them all. But she had to try. Hope, fragile yet persistent, flickered within her chest. Focusing all her remaining strength, Hannah channeled the energy from the shard, directing it towards the heart of the vortex. A blinding beam of golden light erupted, piercing the oppressive darkness. The light collided with the vortex, creating a deafening roar as the two forces clashed. The cavern shook violently, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. The shadowy figures within the vortex shrieked in agony as the golden energy burned away their forms. The air crackled with power, a chaotic dance of light and shadow. Hannah gritted her teeth, straining to maintain the connection, to hold the beam steady. It felt like trying to hold back a tidal wave with her bare hands. The vortex fought back, sending tendrils of dark energy towards her, attempting to disrupt her concentration. She deflected them with bursts of golden light, each parry draining her strength further. Slowly, agonizingly, the golden light began to take effect. The vortex, once a unified mass of darkness, started to fracture, its edges crumbling like ancient stone. Cracks appeared in its surface, revealing glimpses of the void within. The shadowy figures, no longer cohesive, scattered and dissipated like smoke in the wind. The whispers grew weaker, replaced by a keening wail of frustration. Hannah felt a surge of hope, a sense that she was finally gaining ground. The crystalline shard glowed brighter, its light intensifying as it amplified her power. But the vortex was fighting back with renewed ferocity, unleashing a final surge of dark energy in a desperate attempt to resist. The cavern echoed with the sounds of destruction. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the vortex imploded. A wave of golden energy washed over the cavern, pushing back the remaining shadows and illuminating the space with a soft, ethereal glow. The crystalline shard dimmed, its power spent. Hannah collapsed to her knees, utterly exhausted but victorious. The darkness was gone, banished, at least for now. The cavern fell silent, the only sound her ragged breathing. She looked around, taking in the devastation. The symbols on the walls were no longer pulsing, they were still. The air felt cleaner, lighter. A profound sense of relief washed over her, mingled with a deep weariness. The fight had been won, but the war was far from over. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the darkness would return. The golden light faded, leaving Hannah trembling, her body aching with exertion. The cavern, once consumed by the vortex's darkness, was now bathed in a gentle, otherworldly luminescence. Dust motes swirled in the air, illuminated like tiny stars. Kalen pushed himself up, leaning heavily on a nearby crystal formation. His face was pale, etched with exhaustion, but his eyes held a spark of gratitude. "Hannah, you did it," he rasped, his voice hoarse. He stumbled towards her, his steps unsteady. The crystalline shard in her hand felt strangely weightless, its power completely spent. A profound silence descended, broken only by the drip of water echoing through the cavern. The air still crackled with residual energy, a tangible reminder of the battle they had just fought. But the immediate threat was gone. The vortex, the source of so much pain and destruction, was no more. Yet, a lingering unease settled in Hannah's heart. The victory felt incomplete. The void glimpsed within the vortex hadn't vanished, it had simply been contained. A sense of foreboding washed over her. "It's not over, Kalen," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We stopped the outward spread, but something remains." She looked deeper into the cavern, past the dissipating light, towards the unexplored depths. Kalen's eyes scanned the cavern, searching for any sign of remaining instability. The crystalline formations, once pulsating with malevolent energy, now seemed dormant, their sharp edges softened by the golden light. He noticed a faint tremor, a subtle vibration that ran through the very stone beneath their feet. "The energy, it's not completely dissipated," he murmured, his brow furrowed. He ran a hand over a nearby crystal, feeling its cool, smooth surface. "There's a residual resonance, a lingering echo of the vortex's power." Hannah nodded, her grip tightening on the shard. "I feel it too. It's different. More focused, somehow. Like it's gathering strength." The air grew colder, and the faint tremor intensified. Shadows danced in the periphery of their vision, coalescing into indistinct shapes. Kalen drew his sword, its polished surface reflecting the ethereal glow. "Whatever remains, it's not idle. It's observing." He scanned the cavern walls, his senses on high alert. The silence was oppressive, heavy with anticipation. He could feel a presence, something ancient and malevolent, watching them from the darkness. The crystalline shard in Hannah's hand began to pulse faintly, emitting a soft, rhythmic hum. It was as if the shard itself was sensing the impending danger. Hannah and Kalen moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast cavern. The shard cast a flickering light, revealing intricate carvings etched into the walls. The symbols were unlike anything they had ever seen, angular, unsettling, and pulsing with a faint, internal luminescence. They seemed to writhe and shift in their peripheral vision, playing tricks on the eye. "These markings, they're not of this world," Kalen whispered, tracing one of the symbols with his finger. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he stumbled back. "They resonate with something ancient. Something hungry." Hannah felt a similar sensation, a creeping unease that settled deep in her bones. The air grew thick with a strange, metallic scent. The path ahead narrowed, leading them deeper into the heart of the cavern. The pulsing of the shard intensified, bathing the surroundings in an increasingly bright light. The symbols on the walls began to glow with greater intensity, casting eerie shadows that danced around them. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the cavern, vibrating deep within their chests. The shadows coalesced into a monstrous form, its eyes burning with malevolent intent. It was a creature of darkness and shadow, its body composed of swirling tendrils of black energy. With a deafening roar, the creature lunged, its shadowy tendrils snaking out towards Hannah and Kalen. Kalen reacted instantly, drawing his sword and deflecting the attack. The blade clashed against the creature's form, sending sparks of dark energy flying. He fought with a desperate ferocity, his movements precise and powerful. But the creature was relentless, its tendrils constantly probing for weakness. Hannah, meanwhile, frantically scanned the symbols on the walls, trying to decipher their meaning. The pulsing light of the shard illuminated the carvings, revealing hidden patterns and intricate connections. She realized that the symbols were not merely decorative, they were a form of containment, a magical ward designed to imprison something powerful. I think I understand, she shouted over the din of battle. These symbols, they're a key. A key to disrupting its energy flow. She began to trace the symbols with her finger, channeling the remaining power of the shard into the carvings. A surge of energy flowed through her, making her gasp. The creature, sensing Hannah's interference, turned its attention towards her, its eyes burning with rage. As Hannah completed the final symbol, a blinding flash of light erupted from the walls, engulfing the creature in a wave of energy. The creature shrieked in pain as its shadowy form flickered and distorted. The tendrils recoiled, losing their strength. The energy flow within the creature was disrupted, causing it to weaken and destabilize. Kalen seized the opportunity, charging forward and plunging his sword deep into the creature's core. A final, agonizing roar echoed through the cavern as the creature dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, leaving only the faint scent of sulfur in the air. The pulsing of the shard subsided, and Hannah collapsed to her knees, exhausted but relieved. Kalen stood over the dissipating smoke, his chest heaving, his sword dripping with dark energy. "It's gone, for now," he said, his voice filled with exhaustion. Hannah looked up at him, a weary smile on her face. "It won't be the last," she replied. The cavern was silent once more, but the sense of foreboding lingered. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The light subsided, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The creature, weakened but not defeated, writhed in the cavern, its form dissolving into swirling shadows. Wisps of dark energy continued to drift, clinging to the damp stone. Hannah gasped, clutching her hand, a faint warmth radiating from her palm. "Is it gone?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kalen scanned the cavern, his sword still raised. The air felt heavy, charged with residual power. "Not entirely," he replied grimly. "It's retreating, reforming. The ritual disrupted its anchor, but it's still present." He noticed a deeper fissure in the cavern wall, previously obscured by the creature's bulk. A faint, pulsating darkness emanated from within. "We need to move. Now." Hannah nodded, understanding the urgency in his tone. The victory felt fragile, a temporary reprieve. The carvings on the walls seemed to pulse with a renewed intensity. The air grew colder, and a low growl echoed from the fissure. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new, more dangerous phase. They had weakened the creature, but they hadn't destroyed it. And whatever lay beyond that fissure, it felt far more ancient and malevolent. Hannah took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. The energy surge had drained her, leaving her feeling weak and vulnerable. But she couldn't falter. "The symbols, they weren't just a banishment," she muttered, tracing the glowing lines with her finger. "They were a redirection. A temporary severing, not a permanent solution." Kalen placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What do you mean?" Hannah explained, her voice gaining strength. "The energy wasn't just pushing it back. It was redirecting its essence. Where do you think it's going?" She gestured towards the fissure. "Into that darkness. It's not gone, it's being drawn into something else, something deeper." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "And what is that something else?" Hannah shook her head, uncertainty clouding her features. "I don't know. But we need to find out. Before it fully manifests." The runes on the wall began to dim, their glow fading. The growl from the fissure intensified, accompanied by a scraping sound, as if something large was struggling to break free. Time was running out. Dark tendrils snaked out from the fissure, writhing like living shadows. They lashed out towards them, seeking purchase. Kalen raised his sword, deflecting the first attack. The blade met with a sickening thud as the dark energy dissipated. More tendrils emerged, faster and more aggressive. Hannah began chanting, her voice echoing through the cavern, attempting to reinforce the weakened barrier. The air crackled with tension. "It's trying to anchor itself," she shouted over the growls and scraping sounds. "We need to disrupt its connection." Kalen fought defensively, creating a small circle of protection around them. He knew he couldn't hold them off for long. The tendrils were relentless, constantly probing for weaknesses. One lashed out, wrapping around his leg, attempting to drag him towards the fissure. He grunted with effort, wrenching himself free. Hannah's chanting grew louder, more urgent. She was drawing on her remaining energy, pushing herself to the limit. Hannah poured the last of her strength into the ritual. Her hands blazed with a brilliant, white light, channeling energy into the fissure. The tendrils recoiled as the light touched them, hissing and dissolving. Kalen continued to fight, his movements precise and deadly, creating an opening for Hannah. He knew that if she failed, they were both doomed. The fissure pulsed with a dark, malevolent energy, resisting her efforts. Sweat streamed down Hannah's face, her body trembling with exertion. She pushed harder, focusing all her will on severing the connection. The light intensified, bathing the cavern in a blinding glow. The scraping sounds from the fissure grew louder, more frantic. It was a desperate struggle, a battle between light and darkness. Kalen saw a shape beginning to coalesce within the fissure, a shadowy form taking shape. It was vast and terrifying, and it was close to breaking through. With a final surge of energy, Hannah unleashed a wave of pure light. The fissure erupted, and the shadowy form recoiled, screeching in fury. The tendrils vanished, and the darkness began to recede. The shape within the fissure flickered, unstable and weakened. But it wasn't gone. It was merely contained, pushed back into the depths. Hannah collapsed, her energy completely depleted. Kalen rushed to her side, supporting her weight. They stood there, breathing heavily, surrounded by the lingering echoes of the battle. The cavern was silent once more, but the tension remained. They had bought themselves time, but the threat was far from over. They knew that this was only a temporary victory, and that the darkness would eventually return. They had a long road ahead of them, a difficult path to protect the world from the forces that lurked beneath. Their journey had just begun. The air hung thick with the scent of ozone and something ancient, something akin to dust and forgotten things. Hannah collapsed to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Kalen remained standing, his sword still raised, though the immediate threat had vanished. The fissure, once a gaping maw of darkness, was now a slowly closing wound in the cavern wall. He sheathed his blade, the metallic click echoing in the sudden quiet. "Is it gone?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Hannah managed a weak nod, her eyes closed. "For now," she whispered. "But it will return. They always do." A shadow flickered at the edge of Kalen's vision. He spun around, sword drawn, but saw nothing. Just the ancient carvings, depicting beings of immense power, beings that seemed to writhe even in their stone form. He felt a chill crawl down his spine. This wasn't the end. It was merely a pause. A breath before the storm. He knelt beside Hannah, helping her to sit up. "We need to leave," he said, his voice firm despite the unease churning within him. "Now." The cavern felt colder now, the receding darkness leaving a void that seemed to press in on them. The carvings seemed to watch them, judging. Hannah opened her eyes, focusing on Kalen's face. His concern was evident, etched into the lines around his eyes. She forced a small smile. "We have to understand what that was," she said, her voice regaining a little strength. "It wasn't just darkness. It was intelligent. It was searching for something." Kalen nodded. He knew she was right. The power she had unleashed had been immense, far beyond anything she had demonstrated before. Where had that power come from? And what had the darkness been seeking? The text spoke of a shard, Kalen said, referring to the ancient scrolls she had studied for years. A piece of a shattered god, capable of immense destruction. They said it was hidden somewhere in these mountains. Hannah shivered. The thought of such a thing existing, of such power being unleashed, was terrifying. If that's what it was, we can't let it fall into the wrong hands. She looked back at the fissure, now almost completely sealed. It's not truly gone. It's just dormant. And it will awaken again. We need to find the shard first. Her gaze hardened with resolve. The task ahead was daunting, but she knew they had no choice. The fate of the world might depend on it. The passage was treacherous, the walls slick with moisture. Each step was carefully placed, the silence broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water and their own breathing. Kalen moved ahead, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, scanning the shadows. He trusted Hannah's knowledge, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air grew colder, the scent of dust intensifying. He noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols that weren't part of the ancient carvings. They were newer, more crude, almost scratched into the stone. "Hannah," he said, stopping. "Do you recognize these?" Hannah approached, studying the markings. Her face paled. "These are cultist symbols," she whispered. "A forgotten sect that worshipped darkness. They believed in the power of the shattered god." Kalen felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't just about a lost shard anymore. It was about a cult that had been waiting for centuries. "They're still active?" he asked. Hannah shook her head. "I thought they were extinct. But if they're connected to this, then they're a threat." The passage opened into a vast chamber, hidden deep within the mountain. In the center stood an altar, constructed from black stone. Upon the altar rested a crystal, pulsing with a sickly, dark energy. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, its facets catching the torchlight and reflecting it in a mesmerizing dance of shadows. The walls around the altar were covered in the cultist symbols Hannah had identified. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, making the hairs on Kalen's arms stand on end. "There," Hannah breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. "The shard." As she stepped closer, the crystal pulsed brighter, and the symbols on the walls seemed to glow with a malevolent light. A voice echoed through the chamber, ancient and cold. "Welcome. We have been expecting you." From the shadows, figures emerged, cloaked and hooded, their faces obscured. They carried daggers and staffs, their eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "Who are you?" Kalen demanded, his hand tightening on his sword. "We are the keepers of the shadow," the voice replied. "We have waited centuries for the return of our god. The shard will restore him to power." Hannah stepped forward. "You don't understand the destruction you're unleashing," she said. "The shard is a weapon of chaos. It will consume everything." The leader of the cultists laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. "Chaos is order," he hissed. "Destruction is creation. The old world must be broken to make way for the new." He raised his hand, and the cultists surged forward. Kalen met them head-on, his sword a blur of steel. Hannah focused her energy, preparing to unleash another wave of light. The fate of the world hung in the balance, resting on the outcome of this desperate battle. The crystal pulsed faster, its dark energy intensifying, threatening to consume them all. Kalen lowered his sword slightly, though his vigilance remained high. "Restore him to power? What god are you speaking of?" The voice, seemingly emanating from the crystal itself, echoed through the chamber. "A god of shadows, of forgotten things. A god whose reign will usher in an age of true order." Hannah stepped forward, her voice firm despite the unsettling atmosphere. "You speak of destruction, not order. This shard isn't a key to power, it's a prison. It contains something that should remain contained." One of the keepers detached from the circle, gliding silently towards Hannah. "Insolent mortal. You know nothing of the power that slumbers within." The keeper raised a hand, and tendrils of shadow snaked out, reaching for Hannah. Kalen reacted instantly, stepping between the keeper and Hannah, his sword drawn. A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with anticipation. The crystal pulsed faster, its light intensifying. Hannah met the keeper's gaze, her expression unwavering. She focused her energy, a warmth spreading through her veins. "The shard isn't a prison for him," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "It's a prison for you. You feed on his power, you thrive in his shadow. But without him, you are nothing." The golden light intensified, forming a protective barrier around Hannah. The shadows recoiled, hissing as they met the light. The keeper recoiled as well, a flicker of something akin to pain crossing its obscured face. Kalen saw an opportunity. He lunged forward, aiming his sword at the keeper. The keeper deflected the blow with unnatural speed, its movements fluid and unsettling. The chamber seemed to vibrate with the clash of steel and shadow. The battle was fierce. Kalen, skilled and strong, fought with desperate resolve. The keeper was agile and powerful, its movements unpredictable. Each parry sent tremors through Kalen's arm. He managed to land a few blows, but the keeper seemed unfazed. The shadows around the keeper lashed out, attempting to ensnare Kalen. He narrowly dodged, feeling a chilling touch brush against his skin. Hannah continued to channel her energy, maintaining the protective barrier. She knew she couldn't defeat the keepers alone. She needed to find a way to disrupt the crystal's power. The pulsing intensified, threatening to overwhelm her. Ignoring the keeper's attacks, Hannah focused on the crystal. She channeled all her energy into it, attempting to disrupt its flow. The golden light from her hands surged, colliding with the dark energy of the crystal. The chamber filled with a blinding flash of light. The keeper shrieked, recoiling from the intense energy. The crystal's pulsing became erratic, its light flickering violently. The ground trembled. Kalen used the distraction to press his attack, forcing the keeper back. The barrier around Hannah wavered, but she held firm. With a final surge of power, Hannah shattered the crystal. A wave of energy erupted, throwing Kalen and Hannah back. The chamber was filled with a deafening roar. The shadows surrounding the keepers dissipated, and the figures began to dissolve into nothingness. The pulsating light vanished, leaving the chamber in near darkness. Kalen struggled to his feet, coughing. Hannah stood beside him, weakened but alive. The air was still thick with residual energy. "It's over," Hannah gasped. Kalen nodded, his gaze sweeping over the dissolving shadows. "For now. But what have we unleashed?" The silence that followed was more terrifying than any roar. The roar subsided, leaving a ringing silence. Kalen pushed himself up, wincing at the pain lancing through his side. Hannah lay a few feet away, breathing heavily, her hands still faintly glowing. The remaining shadows, the remnants of the keepers, weren't attacking, they were simply fading. Dissolving into nothingness like smoke in the wind. The crystal, once a source of oppressive darkness, was now gone, its power nullified. A sense of profound relief washed over Kalen, quickly followed by a wave of exhaustion. He looked at Hannah, her face pale but resolute. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Hannah nodded slowly, a weak smile gracing her lips. "I think so. The connection, it's broken." She looked down at her hands, the golden light receding. The air in the chamber felt lighter, cleaner. The oppressive weight that had hung over the fortress for so long had vanished. The keeper's purpose, to feed on fear and despair, was extinguished with the crystal. Their existence was intrinsically tied to its power. Kalen stood and helped Hannah to her feet. She leaned on him for support. "We did it," he said, a genuine smile finally breaking through his weary expression. The battle had been brutal, pushing them to their limits, but they had prevailed. The darkness was lifted. Hannah's hand rested lightly on Kalen's arm, a silent acknowledgement of the shared ordeal. The golden light was gone, but the warmth in her eyes remained. She had poured so much of herself into disrupting the crystal's power, pushing her abilities to the very edge. It had taken a toll, leaving her drained but strangely empowered. She had always been drawn to the light, to healing and restoration. This battle, though terrifying, had reaffirmed her belief in the inherent good within the world, a good worth fighting for. Kalen squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you, Hannah," he murmured. "I don't know what I would have done without you." He had always admired her strength, her unwavering optimism. He, a warrior hardened by years of conflict, had often struggled with doubt and despair. Hannah's presence was a constant source of light, a reminder of what they were fighting for. He realized that true strength wasn't just about wielding a sword, it was about finding strength in connection, in shared purpose and unwavering belief in one another. Their paths had intertwined unexpectedly, but together, they had become a formidable force. The bond between them, forged in the fires of battle, felt stronger than ever. Dawn broke over the fortress, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The courtyard, once shrouded in gloom, was now bathed in the soft, welcoming light of a new day. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and quiet. Kaelin and Hannah stood side by side, gazing out at the horizon. The fortress, though scarred by the battle, stood tall and proud, a testament to their resilience. The shadows that had plagued the land for generations were gone, banished by the power of hope and the courage of two unlikely heroes. Their journey wasn't over, there would be challenges ahead, new threats to face. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection, a moment to savor their victory. They had not only saved the fortress but had also saved themselves, reaffirming their belief in the power of unity and the importance of fighting for what is right. The sun rose higher, casting a warm glow on their faces, a promise of a brighter future. They walked away from the fortress, leaving behind the ruins of the Keeper's power. The path ahead led towards a dense forest, a place of mystery and untold possibilities. Kaelin and Hannah walked hand in hand, their steps lighter than they had been before. The weight of the world seemed to have lifted from their shoulders, replaced by a sense of shared purpose and quiet optimism. They had faced darkness and emerged victorious, but the world was still full of shadows. They knew that their journey wasn't over, that there would be other battles to fight, other evils to overcome. But they were no longer afraid. They had found strength in each other, a strength that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. As they entered the forest, the trees closed in around them, creating a sense of sanctuary and protection. The path ahead was uncertain, but they faced it together, ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. Their adventure was far from over. A panoramic view revealed the transformation of the land. Where shadows had once reigned, life now flourished. The barren fields were green again, wildflowers bloomed in vibrant colors, and birds sang in the trees. A rainbow arced across the sky, a symbol of hope and renewal. The oppressive darkness that had choked the land for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of vitality and peace. The people, freed from the Keeper's influence, began to rebuild their lives, their spirits lifted by the victory. Kaelin and Hannah, though weary, felt a profound sense of satisfaction. They had not only defeated an evil, but had also restored hope to a broken world. Their actions would be remembered, their names etched in the annals of history. They had become legends, symbols of courage, resilience, and the enduring power of light. The world was healing, and they had played a part in its recovery. And as they walked towards the horizon, hand in hand, they knew that their legacy would live on, inspiring future generations to fight for what is right and to never give up hope.